I think I can start talking now, and I'm not talking over the music because my Skype isn't giving me any clue that there's a bumpers playing on the station. So apologies if there was a gap or if I've been speaking over the top of the intro. Welcome to Shiny Side Out with myself, Dave, and
Mickey.
Oh, awesome. Broadcasting from Australia for Revolution Radio on, you guessed it, www.revolution.radio, where it's more than just radio, so jump into the chat if you can. This is show number 328.
820 and 300.
I still love the way he does that. It's on air, online, and on your smart device. So listen from anywhere. Or maybe you don't want to go anywhere else. Maybe you just want to listen from at home. And you can do that using a Grace tabletop digital radio. I'm still going to get me one. That's what I want. If you missed it, and I've got some details here. So I've been speaking with Solaris after her show, and today she had two guests. She had Mr. Rowe and I'm going to look back through the conversation, and Steve Travesty, and they were talking about UFOs, politics, and artificial intelligence. That's a topic on the tip of my tongue also, artificial intelligence.
Doesn't exist. I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure about non-artificial intelligence either.
That's
right?
half of my conversation. The other half is that people are genuinely afraid of where it could go, and we should be careful. I think we shouldn't just do what we did with, I don't know, aspartame, nicotine, what's the other ones? Teflon, aluminium,
aluminum.
Aluminum, nuclear. We should be very careful about how we approach it. Anyway, that's another topic. Since we talk about Solaris, you may not know who that is. You may be wondering, what is a Solaris? Well, Solaris is a lovely lady, and she has a show on before us, and you need to check out her shows. But if the time zone doesn't suit, did you know that you can go to revolution.radio, subscribe to the archives for only $5.95 a month? That's all it is. And you get access to all of the host shows from Revolution Radio. It lets you in. It lets you into, it's the locked basement, basically. You're getting access to that. And they're all like MP3s, so you can listen in your own time. I love it, because I commute and I get to hear people's shows when otherwise I wouldn't. I was at a thing yesterday, the Five Lands Walk, where the 5 different beaches, there's a walk, it's like 30 kilometers, and everyone gets suited up appropriately and walks in the wondrous sunshine along our coastline, usually across the headlands, down along the beach forefronts. Fantastic day it was yesterday. And I heard the same words, Mecky, and I met these people actually while I was there, and that is, we, it's Shiny Side Out, Mecky and I, acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. Where I live, I met the Darkanyung people. And where Mecky lives,
the Daruk.
Absolutely. And we pay respects to elders past, present, and future. Now, not many people say future as well, because I think we should. It means we're not just acknowledging them from the past and who's there today, but also who's coming. All right. That also propagates a continuation of the custodial role that they're playing. And let us remember that beneath our houses, concrete roads and buildings are lands which have had stories passed down for 240,000 generations, conservatively. Meki, how are you?
Good. I can't post in the chat, so apologies for anybody in there. I'm in there. I can see myself in there, and I can see everybody, but I don't have the permissions, it seems, to post anything.
Really?
That's the error message. Yeah, that's the error message I'm getting. So, but that shouldn't discourage you from entering the chat. You should go to the chat. It's great to interact with us. I cannot talk to you, but I can see what you write and Omega Logos. Just to you, our Skype seems to be okay for now. Not like last week. So yeah, no, it seems to be all right. Well, interestingly enough, you don't call me anymore. Oh. I just log into the call because the call just pops up. I don't get a ringing signal from you. Like, it doesn't ring.
Oh.
It's just there. It says Revolution Radio, 3 participants. I'm one of them, even though I'm not there. And then I see, click on join call. So I click on join call and bingo, there I am. But there's no ringtone. I know, right? It's one of this.
Because this week we can't hear the bumper music.
Right.
So last week I was asked to be able to connect to the station. I had to do a tricky thing with the codecs, and I did that, and we could hear the bumper music. So this time I connect with the same configuration as last week. Can't hear the bumper music, I'm afraid. So
yeah. So yeah, in the chat we can see it. Like I said, tell us when you hear the music. It's probably too late when we just blabbering all over it. But if you can let us know, that'd be great. So we don't blabber all over the music. It's been an interesting week yet again. I saw some disturbing things. Disturbing. I guess we've become desensitized, but there's one thing that was sent to me. Look, I don't want to. I think it might have been either James or Solaris. It was a Facebook clip or link, rather, to a TEDx talk, which had actually been taken off, but you can still see it in the different silos. But this young lady. Yeah, in Germany, she had this talk around how pedophilia is a normal sexual orientation, especially if you don't act on it, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I have children. I find it disturbing when I hear things like that. Rationalizing these things. Oh, no, it's okay to be a serial killer. It's a normal thing. Just don't act on it. Yeah, okay. But eventually, when these things are, these are psychologically... I guess, responsive conditions, meaning you are eventually giving into your urges or your tendencies. It's just human nature. I don't think we should look to excuse any of these things. In my, it's going to sound horrible, but in my opinion, it's an aberration because it doesn't fulfill any purpose per se, right? It's just not. The right thing to do to interfere with children, for certainly. Right? That's my opinion. It's just me. Maybe I'm standing alone, but I don't think you should interfere with children. Full stop. So I found that a little disturbing, Dave.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. I wanted to watch it because I wanted to know the opinion being formed in that talk. And I came to the same. I did come to the same conclusion that with you, Becky, that children should be children, and that's the end of that discussion. They shouldn't be involved in any activity outside of that, because the harm that comes to the children is way greater than than the pleasure of the individual, for that moment. So I just have to be careful. I'm not condoning it. I understand from not only from the talk, but from, there's crime everywhere. And Mackie, you likened it to serial killing as well. Yeah, I think it's an awful thing to interfere with the like, I think that, what is it, Jim Morrison said, fragile eggshell mind.
Yeah, 100%.
He said it best. And
yeah.
If broken at the wrong time, it's never going to be the same again. And for all of those people who may have been negatively impacted by those kind of events in your life, certainly before you were physically ready or able to consent, I feel for you. All right, so probably the wrong wording, but my heart goes out to you. All right, so yeah,
it's a bad situation, and we look. I don't want to draw parallels here, right? Because it doesn't really mean the same thing. But what this is doing now, these movements, and there'll be others as well. There'll be something around serial killers, and there'll be something around other things which are plainly not right. But it's jumping on the bandwagon of our age of permissiveness. Now, I'm all for freedom and liberty and everybody doing what they want as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else and as long as it's between consenting adults and whatever. I don't care. In fact, nobody should care because it's no one's business, right? But we have now in Australia, I think we've voted pro gay marriage, which I think is fantastic because first of all, it's no one's business for start. I mean, we should never have had the vote. There should never have been a vote. It should just have been the thing. Do you know what I mean? I mean, politicians get paid and elected to make decisions, and they should listen to the electorate. And the electorate said, yes, let's do it. But anyway, so there was the vote, which in itself, like I said, was a huge waste of time and money, and also it caused some divisions within the community. But the vote came out positive, and I'm for it. But what we're seeing now is that there are other groups completely unrelated to this particular movement are also trying to legitimize, in my opinion, I could be wrong, but in my opinion, trying to legitimize their specific,
their plight.
I don't know, their plight, whatever it might be, their point of view. But, and I have to say this, there has to be a line drawn here somewhere, right? Am I in favor of gay, lesbian, and so forth marriage? 100%. Two consenting adults, grown-up adults that know what they're doing. I don't care what you do. Knock yourself out. Pedophilia, interfering with children, very different ballgame. Completely different ballgame. Not at all related to any of that. And that cannot be allowed, that plight, if you want to call it that, cannot be allowed to jump on the bandwagon here. Cannot happen. Can't. Now, having said that, this talk was held in Germany, and the woman clearly was a young lady, clearly was a German. Germany has gone too far in its permissiveness, in its guilt trip. I grew up in Germany in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and then I came to Australia. And Germany, back then, in the 70s and 80s certainly, still suffered from the collective guilt or trauma of World War II, the Holocaust, but not just that. I mean, all the other horrors that happened during World War II, and never got over it. And in fact, the children that my peers, my classmates, were never allowed to forget about it. I mean, a lot of people still lived or were alive that had lived through World War II at that point. The point is that this guilt, which has now been ingrained into the German psyche, makes for a very odd political opinion, point of view, even a campaign, if you will. Everything is allowed in Germany, except for the German mainstream, the culture. It's not allowed. So being proud to be German was something that was unthinkable when I was young.
Wow.
Now completely. Now it might have changed, but everything else is okay. So it's similar to America, I have to say, and even in Australia, where we started to not celebrate Christmas or call it Christmas or whatever, or even have religious icons in school. And I'm not religious, So I don't care. Having said that, I grew up in a Judeo-Christian country with half my family being of a Muslim background, and my further ancestors, 3-4 generations going back to being Jewish. Anyway, the point is that there are certain things that make up our culture, and Christmas is one of them. If you grow up in a Western country, then Christmas is part of one of those things, right? We can not allow political correctness, and this is really what this is, political or even cultural sensitivity, to allow us to forget our own cultures, our own upbringing, our own heritage. Mm-hmm. And that so if you combine that with this collective guilt that the Germans are feeling, you've got a horrible seedbed for all kinds of human rights violations against the Germans, perpetrated by immigrants or criminals or whomever, right? Because, oh no, we can't fight back. Then we are the bad Germans again. I mean, no one says this, and it might not even be a conscious thing, right? I believe it's probably completely subconscious, where Germans cannot fight back or complain about others, or or be overtly racist. I mean, there are lots of racists in Germany. Don't get me wrong, but certainly the government or the institutions can't appear that way. So it's a very, very bad situation, which of course then affects all of Europe. If you have 1 million refugees joining your country, 1 million, I don't care how big your country is, I really don't. I mean, countries that could absorb it might be India, maybe China. Every other country would have a hard time absorbing an extra 1 million people. That has knock-on effects for the rest of Europe, right? And already we're seeing, troubles in France, Great Britain, and other places, certainly in the Scandinavian countries. And it's just going to get worse. It's going to get worse. I mean, the law is the law, and people have to be held accountable. I don't care what your background is, if you're a refugee or not. It's not about racism or racial profiling. You commit a crime, you go to jail. It's that simple. It is that simple. And again, the reason I'm saying this is because this young lady clearly that did this TEDx talk on pedophilia is from Germany. But it is that and people don't understand this. It's this undercurrent of thinking that seems to pervade, or everything, permeate into every aspect of German life. Yeah, everything is allowed. There was a guy who advertised some years ago for someone to be eaten. So on the internet, right. he went.
It was in a
German.
personal.
Yeah, it was German, and I want to eat someone. Yeah, he didn't say he wants to kill someone. He says he wants to eat someone. So okay, so off he goes to the end. And you think, well, that's where it ends because nobody's insane enough to answer that, right? That's just craziness. But no, clearly people answered, not just a person, but a number of people. So eventually, the right person, I guess, responded. They met and discussed what should happen. I won't go into the details. Suffice it to say, the person that had responded then went into the bath and committed suicide. Now, the guy didn't kill him, but he let him die. And then he went and cut some meat off and prepared and ate it. The Germans were at a loss as to what to charge him with. Because cannibalism is not against the law. It's not specifically against the law. I mean, I guess nobody ever thought about, we better put a law in here that says you shouldn't really eat anyone, right? I mean, I don't know how many people or how many countries in the world have laws against cannibalism. In fact, look at your constitution or your fundamental law book. So have a look at that. Is cannibalism actually an illegal act? And you probably find, well, maybe not. It's not that it was overlooked. It was just, it's just not done anymore.
It was simply thought no one would want to do it.
Yeah, and let alone someone volunteering for it. So what they charged with him, what they charged him with was wrongful death or
not assisting or something.
No, not yeah. So yeah, exactly. Like he let it happen. So the duty of he didn't observe his duty of care. I don't know. I think he went to jail. I don't think very long. But again in Germany, and it is that mindset yet again that seems to, I can do anything, as long as I'm not a racist and I don't hate Jews, I can do whatever I want. Well, no, it's not really like that, and we shouldn't allow this, and the Germans shouldn't allow this. And because once you start down that road of thinking like that, pedophilia really just is a normal, normal sexual orientation. that's just, once you start down that road, what's next? And in fact, how far down that road do you think then? So all of a sudden, it's okay to do all these things, is it? Really? No, it's not. It's never okay. I don't care where you are, who you are, what you are. It's never okay to do any of that. But we have now taken the first steps on the road to thinking like that. It's like, I liken it to the other insanity on the other end of the spectrum, which is around mental disorders. Wanting to eat healthy food is a mental disorder. Grief.
Now.
Yeah, grief has been classified as a mental disorder. Wow. I mean,
see,
what?
I thought disorders were meant to be outside of the normal.
Yeah, that's right. We all
you
have
think
to now.
So, but
we're all lobotomized. There's no more grief, Dave. Isn't that wonderful? Yes, everything's just peachy. Pop another, whatever the hell you're popping, right?
Just drink the water. That seems to fix everything.
Just drink the water. Look, I didn't want to stray too far afield with this, but it did bother me a little seeing it. And then once you unravel the background, and I hope I helped you understand some of the thinking behind this, it does become, I guess, a concern to all. And let's not forget that the criminals of that nature in prison are at the bottom of the prison order, and are usually killed by their fellow inmates, if not guards. Because the one thing, this is the people that engage in this kind of behavior, they're not loved, liked, or protected by anyone. Yeah, because criminals
prisoners go to town on them. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Because these prisoners have families as well outside in the world, right? They have families. Okay, so they're thieves, maybe they're bank robbers, maybe even murderers, right? It's possible, but they still probably have families out there.
But hang on, Mickey, those thieves and murderers have morals.
Yeah. Well, see, this. Okay, now this
they
is
broke
very
some rules.
important.
They broke some rules, but they got morals.
Yeah. So, Dave, you raised a very interesting point here. So, what we have in society are two things. One, we've got a whole bunch of laws. And they say you shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that, blah, blah. And look, a lot of the laws are sensible, right? But they're laws. But then we have something that's outside of that. And now, some of these things I'm going to say are also laws. But first, I think they're ethical foundations or moral foundations that we all have. All of us, notwithstanding any abnormalities or strange traumas during your childhood, are opposed to killing for the most part. Like we don't go out and want to kill everybody. That's not what we do, right? But again, but that's innate. Also, the urge to help people, for the most part, is innate. The less people are around, the more likely you are to help, right? So it's called diffused responsibility. There's negative to that when it comes to mob mentality as well. But the opposite of diffused responsibility is focused responsibility. If there's only you there, then you will help, for the most part. I reckon 99% of people, if they're the only people in the position to help, they will help. Like someone broke down car or whatever, It doesn't really matter, right? The moral compass, right? Now, so the issue here is that some of these have been codified in law, and others we just know, right? We just know they're wrong. And murder, as well as interfering with children, we know is fundamentally wrong. You don't have to be taught that is wrong. Like, no one has to tell you it's wrong to club to death a baby seal, right? Unless there's something fundamentally wrong with you, right? You see that footage, you go, oh my God, right? That's just not right. And it's the same way with interfering with children. It's just not. I mean, we know it's wrong, completely wrong. There's nothing even remotely right about it. Yet it happens, right? So we have to make sure, we have to guard ourselves against this assumption that just because something hasn't been codified in law, which this has, it's okay to do. But even if it has been codified into law, right, then we need to stand behind it, and we cannot allow it to be permitted. It's I can't explain to you how strange it seems to me that somebody would come along and say, oh, it's just another form of sexual orientation. It's just,
didn't they want to add the P to the AGBQ?
Ooh, I think there was something like that, yeah. But
there was something like that, and this came.
But it's completely unrelated, though. It's that's what I'm saying. Don't let them jump on the bandwagon.
I so get it, because I mean, this week also saw the videos getting round of the pony festival where there's only
Yeah.
humans
Yeah, I know.
involved in the
I saw it.
festival. And
Hey, hey.
I've seen that maybe 10 years ago. I saw a show where people, for all intents and purposes, and to use today's terminology, associated more with being a pony than being a human. And so they would have, hooves and, clothing around themselves to be a little bit more pony-like. But in this festival, they're hooked up to carts, right?
Yeah.
And they have to do show jumping and all of this. Now, look, I'm not going to tell them that they're doing something wrong, because I see it as a little odd from my perspective. They seem quite into what they're doing, and that's fine too. One thing, I think that filter, the guide that Meki gave us earlier, I'm gonna call it our moral compass, right?
Yeah.
But if you can apply this rule, the two people involved in it are both consenting, yeah, and they're adults, and they're not hurting anybody, and that means they're not falling into other, breaking any other laws. Fine. Go have your pony first festival.
Hey, I mean, knock yourself out, right?
But
Whatever.
this is exactly, this is part of our moral compass. So if this information, if that TED talk wasn't banned, for instance, right, and taken off TED, because Meki and I, we can just do a TED talk. We can have those 3 letters up in the background on stage somewhere and film ourselves talking about any topic and throw it out there and say it was a TED talk. But I know it's not official. The thing is, the moral compass does need to be tested, because without testing it, we don't know how solid it is. It needs to be flexible, a little flexible, not too flexible, but it needs to, and if you go back 200 years, where, to get to Australia, you just had to steal a loaf of bread, and then that was it.
Yeah.
You moved to another country. Yeah. So today, if someone stole a loaf of bread, even in the hard times, right, you just go, so, if you come round to the back of the store and knock on the door, I'll give you the loaf of bread, right? It's not going to be terrible. But they had an agenda to fill, and that moral compass then obviously was a lot stricter than it is now. And this is what comedians actually talk about, exactly the same thing. What is and isn't funny from our moral compass point of view. And when I talk about comedians, I mean people who are, they're trying to they can make anything sound funny, anything at all. And it doesn't even matter what, even if the topic is awful and current, they can still make it funny.
Yeah.
Now, should we, and should we be able to laugh at it? I think so, if it's funny, if it's made funny. But should we actually laugh at it? Right? That depends on the strength of our moral compass. And that's where we should be applying this stuff, and to see if it is flexible enough to withstand the current events, or is or does it cement it in its place because we all believe that it shouldn't change, right? And that's the hard part. That I know governments struggle with this. We do employ Mekis, you're right. We do employ them to make decisions on our behalf for their constituencies, yeah, that they're meant to represent. But they were so afraid of making that call because the current government has a very strong connection with the church and their backing in the church. And so that they didn't want to be seen as the ones who made that choice, because then they'd lose their backing. Yeah. So what they did was for themselves, not for the people. They listened to the people finally, and there was an overwhelming majority of people that used, once again, that moral compass and said, okay, 2 consenting adults, not hurting anyone, go for your life. Do it. Go and have fun. Because, I mean, the pink ticket, which is meant to be the pink vote, which you can attach to any object. They have pink flights, they have pink ships, they've got, a pink lifestyle, that I'm not being rude, the terminology, there is money in it. And they want to spend, the people who are interested in supporting this, say two fellows wanting to get married, will want a cake made, they'll want a wedding reception, they'll want to hire, people to make food. They'll have guests come, there's hotels, there's a whole thing just around marriage. And if you miss that, well, good luck to your town. You're not going to be supporting it. Well, then don't support it, and then you'll have to reap the negative financial benefits, right? The impact of it. You'll miss out. So, I agree with strongly, and I've either whether it's been in theatre or the airline industry or anywhere else for that matter. My family has always seen or had an exposure to the lifestyle, the flamboyant, the festive, and we don't see it as anything different. In fact, it's, when, Mickey, I've got to make another point here, right? The last one. And that is, if you say that you've got a black friend or you've got a Chinese friend, who are you saying that to? Yeah? Don't you just have friends? Like I've just got friends, right? And I would never. The context of the conversation doesn't come to the point where I say, "But I've got gay friends." Yeah.
Well, look at me! I'm so liberal. Me too. I also am liberal.
Because I really don't care what people are doing. Yeah. And you know what? If I've got pony friends that I don't know, you know what? You can tell me and it's okay. Because I don't care. Right? I really don't care. That's the end of my soapbox. But Meki, I sent you a whole bunch of links this week if you wanted to move on.
Yeah, let's move on. Let's do it.
So, in the complete opposite strain to this, and the segue is strain. The complete opposite strain to this is a new bird flu strain that's in China. That's the two news reports that I saw was 38% and 40% fatalities in contact with this new flu strain. Now it's a bird flu like derivative, like the other ones, and there is a fear that it's going through the avian community, and I'm not talking about people who associate themselves more with birds. So through bird life, it's going through there really, really quickly, and humans having direct contact with them are getting the virus, and it's up to 40%. Say 38% in one story, 40 in the other. Fatalities. Now, if this happens to get someone who is already suffering from the flu, not a cold, but the flu, then it could cross and go like wildfire, because they're talking about this as being, what's it called? Pandemic X? Or Flu X, I think it's called Flu X.
Disease X.
Disease X, thank you. Which is the next one. They've been sitting on this pandemic for some time. Now, I told you guys last year that I had to be given Tamiflu because of the flu. And my daughter was patient 1 on her bus, her field trip, just to a town, to a mining town. They went to a mining town to have a look, and patient 0 was on her bus. And the whole bus brought down the whole school because those people came back and had contact with others. And the school nearly closed. Some 1,000 kids nearly closed because there was no one turning up. And then of course, the parents get it, right? So I had contact and I had it. And I was given Tamiflu. Now, if you don't know what Tamiflu is, it's the government's last bastion to save pandemics from happening. It's the last.
Yeah.
That's the last stop. They don't have any other defence. That's the last line of defence. And in fact, they were giving Tamiflu to the hospital workers to enable them to treat these people. Because that's the thing that they do. That's what you do in a pandemic, right? You can't lose them. So they used up all of their resources of Tamiflu, just trying to fight this. That's crazy. So you wait. If this is disease X coming, it could be like the Spanish flu. Work from home if you can.
Oh yeah.
Not if you work at a cannery or something, because that's very hard to do that from home. You set a little webcam up, Mecky, watching the cans go past. What's your thoughts, Mecky, on the disease X?
Look, to be honest, it was just, well, I don't want to say it's a long time coming, but because we're living in a world there's got a lot of, it's got close to 8 billion people now. Travel is not an issue anymore. I mean, there's massive people. There's other things which we completely ignore. One is what we do to the environment, or what the environment does irrespective of us, right? Which means animal migration patterns are changing. We are being exposed to potential strains of diseases which haven't been around for thousands of years because the permafrost is melting. If a Chinese bird, a duck or whatever, flies anywhere near a permafrost region, for argument's sake, right, and then it picks up something there, which could be a flu that has been around for a long time. I mean, there's even a fear now of mass graves in the permafrost thawing, which holds 1918 Spanish flu victims.
That's right.
Because we never actually beat that flu. It just ran its natural course, right? I mean, there was no I guess vaccine or treatment became available. Just when people got sick, some lived, some died, and then it just went away more or less. What would happen now, almost 100 years later? What would happen now if we were exposed to it again? Go ahead.
Well, we have rather close contact with a lot of people for a sustained amount of time, and the transition of the virus, or the propagation of the virus, or promulgation of the virus, will be just as rife as it's ever been, but it'll extend past just the close-knit city environment that it was, close quarters contact with people. This will extend further out to larger major cities and go cross global. It'll be global. The thing I wanted to mention is, yes, absolutely, these viruses are becoming exposed, but so are also other viruses becoming exposed in the permafrost. And that isn't helping anybody. And the CO2 from the permafrost melting is also not going to do anyone any justice. I'm not trying to be a fearmonger, just saying that's out there, and Mecky, you're absolutely right. And it can cross the globe in 30 hours or less. So it's pretty tough. It's just tough. It's a tough place, and I think I'll say it, Mecky, if you don't want to say it. It is kind of due, and they've been expecting it for at least 7 years that I'm aware of.
Yeah, that's right. So Dave is right. You need to stay away from large crowds. You need to stay away from confined spaces. If someone sneezes at you, that's a bad idea. Mouth guard is not going to help you much. So if you can stay at home, work from home, do all those things. If that flu or disease X is going to hit you or your town, the best way to avoid getting sick is to avoid people. Again, don't want to harp on the prepping aspect of things. Not a bad idea to have some food stores in the house, water and staples that last you a little while. That's a good idea. It's not a bad idea. It's a good idea. So do that. If you are sick yourself, do not be a hero. Go to work. Don't send your children into school, preschool, daycare. I know most of us have no choice because we have to do, run across. We have to work. I get it. If at all possible, stay at home when you're sick, or stay at home to avoid getting sick. these diseases only spread through human or animal contact for the most part, right? And usually, let's hope they're not airborne. But if physical contact is necessary, then I would suggest definitely stay at home. Yeah, is it due? Look, we have suffered through these kinds of things before. Like Dave said, there was the 1918 Spanish flu, which most people don't know about. Interestingly enough,
more people
killed
died
more people
from the Spanish flu than in World War One.
That's correct. Yep. So everybody knows World War One and all the thing, but the Spanish flu killed more people. The other major event, of course, was the Black Plague, which decimated 1/3 of Europe. So we're talking tens of millions of people. Yeah. That's a rocket full of posies. A pocket.
A pocket full of posies.
I have 2 rockets. No, but look, it's a thing, right? And disease is a real thing, and we're now seeing the failure of antibiotics more and more because we've oversubscribed and people are going back to other like serum-like treatments.
In Australia, they've requested that doctors don't hand out antibiotics at all unless it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah. A bit late, but
well, finally, at least,
Well, that's right.
SJ has written here in the chat room and messaged me privately. He said that there's millions of quick caskets stockpiled since 9/11 in the US, and we've seen video evidence of this. That the US is ready for a pandemic as well.
Yeah.
They've prepped by being able to contain the diseased bodies. In Australia, they prepped by buying Tamiflu, enough Tamiflu for all of the essential service workers.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they did that for, so that they can at least continue the operation, of Australia. Yeah, but if something happened, you need to limit your exposure. That's the first one. That our family understands this. Don't touch any public services, and if you do, don't do anything else but wash your hands. Yeah, afterwards, before you're touching your own face or eating food or anything like that. Sneezing in open air is chronic and rife with the spreading of these flus because they become atomized and you breathe them in, and there's no getting past that point. You will be infected if someone atomizes their flu and you breathe that in because it settles on your lungs and that's where it lives. So it's pretty bad, but we've made it this far. Like Meki said, it's even if one does come around, just limit your exposure to it and save your family from it. Yeah.
Completely agree. It's sensible stuff, right? I mean, we're not telling you. We don't want to tell you how to suck eggs. It's common sense stuff, right? I love that phrase, right?
I know, right? The other thing is that I wanted to bring up was the fireballs, because we haven't mentioned this for a little while.
Yeah.
And the amount of meteors that are being seen by people, and we've got more, millions and maybe 2 billion handheld cameras now. So everyone's got one on their person usually. And they're filming this, and there's dash cams, and there's building cameras, and cameras all over the place. Now I was looking, and there was one that landed in Russia again, and it lit up the sky. There was one near a baseball game or a football game or something like that, or no, a concert. There's one near a concert in the US. So I started doing my research like I did last time around, and I could see, and I sent Meki the picture here, and I'm going to paste the shortcut into the chat room. Just doing that now. And if you don't know where it is, it's amsmeteors.org, and you can go to the reports, and if you go there, choose events per year category, and you'll see the same graph we're looking at. And it shows an amazing amount I mean, truly amazing amount of meteors. And over since, say, 2006, where there was 500, it rose slowly up to, say, 2011, with there being 1,600. And since then, it's been on a steady rise, almost linear. I've heard people saying that's an exponential curve, and no, I have a maths background, a physics background. That is definitely not. It's a linear curve, and going up to 5,460 last year, and this year I'm expecting to see it at least as the same height as last year, or maybe just a little bit more. Like going from 2006 to 2017, which is 501 compared to 5,460, that's 10 times the amount of fireballs in the air. That's something else. So when back in 2012, I said, are we heading into this part of dirty space? And I questioned it then, and as I question it now, I think maybe we are. I think we should be very careful. Maybe this is part of our orbit where we haven't truly cleaned this part up. Or maybe it's an intrusion into our orbit. Because the moon assists on the cleanup, right? On the cleanup path. Yeah. And I was telling my daughters about the definition of a planet, and one is that it must have cleaned up its path through its orbit around the sun. Is one of the definitions. Must be spherical, the other one. So all you flat earthers, good luck with that.
Don't hate.
You can hate me all you want, all the flat earthers. I don't mind. Because you show me a clockwork model, come bring one round to my house that shows and makes everything work, and then maybe you'll have me on board. Until then, no. Because when I watch the sunset, I watch the sunset over a spherical Earth, and if it was not a spherical Earth and it was flat, I'd still see the sun 24 hours a day. So
that's right.
Suck on those eggs, then. I didn't do it right, did I, Mackie?
No, but close enough.
All right, so the fireball thing was... to me, that's alarming. That's as alarming, Mackie, as the earthquake quantity at Kilauea.
Yeah, I mean, I saw there's a picture here on one of the news channels. It's actually quite disturbing to see how much of subsidence there has been. It's been quite a cave-in. This is a fairly recent picture as well.
The craters collapsing into the caldera.
Yeah, it's.
Yes.
So look, it's. I would say it's unprecedented, this kind of earthquake activity. But
Krakatoa has started off again.
yeah. Well.
All right.
It's
the one near Madagascar that's started to go off now. There's been 4,000. I've got it on my phone, and every week I post a new image of the amount of earthquakes in the past week at Kilauea, and now it's 4,000 just at Kilauea itself. Yeah. If I zoom back out of that, I get a total picture of the amount at the island itself. And hang on a second. Doing the brightness. So at the whole island in total is 4,221 earthquakes in the past week. Now, if you were living next to any volcano that started to come to life and register a number or increasing numbers of earthquakes, and so much so that it split its top and started leaking out one of its fissures, dikes. But these earthquakes continued. It didn't settle it down. In fact, it's worse now than it was 4 weeks ago in the quantity of earthquakes. It's still rumbling. Is there still going to be something? The Helena slump is still an issue.
Mm-hmm.
We're still looking at that. Scientists are still looking at that. And in fact, this week, Mauna Loa, which is next to it on the same island, they started to delete quakes coming from there. So they'd appear, and then suddenly they'd be removed from the live list. And now they've marked Mauna Loa as green, like it's totally safe. Because that's all you want now, right? Is tourists to land there and go, hey, we're going to go hiking over Mauna Loa. Not Kilauea, but Mauna Loa, just next door. Why? What? There's still earthquakes there, and they're being registered now. The USGS is deleting them, but some of the European agencies aren't. So if you get a combined feed, you can see them all. The software I use collects them, whether they've been deleted or not. So I think I get a combined feed, and it's worrying. It really is worrying when they're giving you the thumbs up. But I'll have to say, Mackie, that this is in South America, near Mexico, near Popocatépetl. There's a range of, say, 30. It's a range. It's like a field of, say, 30 volcanoes. Lots of them are splatter cones, right? And in the US, down the Mount St. Helens range, where there's tons and tons of volcanoes there too. That's now geologically active all over again. Tons of earthquakes. We're seeing earthquakes and like maybe 35, like 30 times 5.0 and above on the last week around the globe, and all near volcanoes.
There's the music.
Just keep
Don't go away. Come back after. Don't go away, and donate if you can. It's easy to do.
There you go.
Hello and welcome back to Dave and Mackie's Shiny Side Out, show number 328, 820 and 300. We're going to talk about the Igigi. We started that last week. I hadn't heard of them. Dave, we now realized that we had heard of them, but in a different context. The first hour we discussed a whole bunch of things. Dave, was there anything left over from the last hour we needed to drag into this hour?
I like the terminology drag. Continue. No, I'm fine. I think we got to close it off. And thank you for allowing me my rants. No. Very important stuff. And look, I'm concerned about a whole bunch of this stuff. And interestingly enough, the BBC didn't actually post any news articles past May 25th on Hawaii or the earthquake. The BBC, not a thing. So it's outside of the news cycle, Mackie. No one's interested in that anymore.
Oh,
and, they're not talking about on CNN or Fox or anyone anymore.
I know, it's just so interesting.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, we are talking about the Igigi. Last week we shared a whole bunch of stuff with you. Today, we're going to share with you what the scientific community thinks about the Igigi. The following was taken from orac.museum.upenn Education, University of Pennsylvania, essentially, right? And it's around what the scientific community knows about the Igigi. According to them, this Semitic term describes a group of possibly 7 or 8 gods. It is likely that the god Marduk was one of them, but the total membership in this group is unclear and likely changed over time. Functions. Like the term Anuna, the term Igigu is equally complicated and in need of a comprehensive new study. Igigu, in brackets here, in parentheses, read more grant money. We need more grant money. Igigu, which is likely of Semitic origin, indicates a group of gods in the Mesopotamian pantheon. It is, however, not entirely clear what distinguishes the Igigu from the Anuna. The story of Atrahasis, the Babylonian story of the flood and the precursor to the flood story in the Gilgamesh epic, Tablet 11, offers some evidence on the relationship between the Anunnaki and the Igigu. The poem begins with the lines, "What the gods When the gods, like men, bore the work and suffered the toil of the gods was great, the work was heavy, the distress was much. That's lines 1 to 4. The composition continues. The 7 great Anunnaki were making the Igigu suffer the work. What follows is partly fragmentary, but seems to indicate that the Igigu gods did not want to work anymore, and therefore the Anunnaki had to find a solution. Ultimately, this led to the creation of humans, who from then on had to bear the gods' work. In this story, it appears that the Igigu were subordinate to the Anunnaki. It is unclear which deities were included in the Igigu group. In the prologue to the famous Code of Hammurabi, it is indicated that the Anunnaki elevated the god Marduk among the Igigu gods, but it is difficult to assess the significance of this passage. Some mythological texts, such as the Anzu myth, speak of an assembly of the Igigu gods, but whether this might be an institutionalized assembly, as suggested by Kinas in 1965, remains doubtful. So, the text that we shared with you last week is yet again cited here in totality by a scientific, I guess, university forum. So we're not making this up. And later on, probably not today, but later on, we will read some of the excerpts of the translated story of Atrahasis. Dave, take us through the genealogy.
As mentioned above by Meki, it is not clear how many and which gods belonged to the Igigu. Although the god Marduk appears to belong to this group for certain, it is possible that the group included only 7. Von Soden in 1966, although 8 that the Kinast in 1965, colon 144. Is that a reference to the page, Meki?
It is.
All right. Or maybe 10. Black and Green, 1988, 106. And that's the quantity of gods. But this is uncertain as well. Other gods who may belong to this group are Ishtar, Azaluhi, Naramist, or Narasmith, Ninurta, Nuska, and Samas. And this comes from the Kinast in 1965 in page 149. Some gods seem to belong to both the Anunnaki and the Igigu. Once again, Kinast, 1965, page 152. Yet, more research is needed to gain a better understanding of the situation in the first millennium BCE.
So, more research means give me yet again more money.
I've got my hat, I'm holding my hat out for some more money. I can't research this. It's almost like community television. But to find out who killed who, you need to call up and we need to hit $10,000 by the end of the ad break.
There you go. That's the way. Actually, interestingly enough, there are no cult places that we know of for the Igigu. The text goes on here. So we don't know any place where they were worshipped, essentially. That comes... And Kinast here, yet again, has repeatedly suggested that the Igigu are only attested in literary and mythological texts, right? So we don't have any actual temples dedicated to the Igigu. However, von Soden in 1966 has brought forth some evidence that might indicate that there are very few theophoric personal names which invoke the Igigu, thus offering some evidence for their veneration. So essentially, the names linked to the Igigu, which have been associated with some worship sites and worship practices. That's what he's saying here.
So I just typed a message to Meki because I don't know what happened to your audio, Meki. Where maybe we, because we served the Anunnaki as well, and not the Igigu, so maybe we were peers, more like peers.
That's possible. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Now, what about the time periods, my friend?
Yeah, the term Igigu is first attested in texts from the Old Babylonian period. Kinast 1976 to 80, page 40. Von Soden, 1989. page 340, and only occurs in the Akkadian contexts. Edzard, 1976-80, page 37. A Sumerian logographic equivalent of the term Igigi is Nun Gal E Ne, to be translated as the great princess or sovereigns, the great princess or great sovereigns. This term is mentioned in a literary text that has been ascribed to the princess Enhedunnana, daughter of King Sargon, the founder of Old Akkadian dynasty. This particular composition is only attested in Old Babylonian manuscripts, and it is unclear whether an older date can be proven. According to Edzard, it is possible that Nun Gal Ene was originally an epithet of Anuna, of the Anuna gods, that later became identified with the Igigi under influence of Akkadian, or from Akkadian. The Igigi and Anunnaki are frequently attested in literary, mythological, and religious, that's incantations and prayers, texts until the end of the cuneiform tradition. The Igigi are mentioned, among others, in the Anzu myth, Aninama Ellis, the Erra poem, all of which are attested manuscripts of the first millennium BCE. So,
That's
Meki,
right.
so you mean we stopped talking about them when they disappeared?
Yeah. Well, potentially. I mean, the thing is this, though. Yeah. Well, that's right. But the thing is, that's when we started writing it down, right? So let's be clear that all these texts refer to are written down, some 3,000 years ago, according to what
the cuneiform is when we stopped mentioning them.
Well, yeah, that's correct. It's correct. So clearly, it was a cultural artifact that didn't apparently come across into anything else, but it did, as we know now. We know that the Igigi also are referred to in the Bible as the Watchers. Yeah, the sons of God that did go and sleep with the human women and so forth. So we made that link last week. But as far as the actual mentioning is concerned, you're correct. There was I guess a Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian specific thing, which wasn't carried on. Certainly not in its original name. But we will learn in a little while. And we have already learned that the name Grigori probably goes back to the Igigi, or at least its etymology can be traced down that way. Now, there's no known iconography of these gods, so no images, and that's primarily because it describes a group of gods, not a god, but we don't have any images of that particular pantheon. The name and the spellings of these various gods, the etymology of this term is unclear. It has been suggested that the term is of Old Akkadian, Amorite, potentially, or possibly Arabic origins for the various spellings. There are different sources here. However, having said that, we did share with you that the name was very clear. It was Ik and Iggy, and we did say that to you. And I'm surprised that they're not mentioning this here. It's a very strange thing that the actual name, the etymology, which is actually available online. So Iggy means I in both Sumerian and in the Akkadian languages, right? And Gi, GI, stands for penetrating sexually. Therefore, the Igigi could be translated to eyes in the sky that watches through the flower, potentially. Mm-hmm. So the etymology is relatively clear. Whether or not scientists or I guess serious scientists want to go that extra mile, clearly the jury is out on that because they don't want to make that mention here. Certainly not in the University of Pennsylvania website, which of course then gives you the link to the biblical watchers and the sons of God as well in the biblical descriptions and other myths. It is the watchers. It's the people I guess that first decided to couple with human women. And clearly there was something that was frowned upon by the other godheads. Which brings us to Atrahasis, the actual protagonist, which means exceedingly wise. Atrahasis means exceedingly wise. A protagonist of an 18th century BC Akkadian epic record in various versions on clay tablets. Now, 18th century BC means, excuse me, 4,000 years ago. Yeah, that's what this means. The Atrahasis tablets include both a creation myth and a flood account. Well, there's a shock. Which is one of the 3 surviving Babylonian deluge stories. The name Atrahasis also appears on one of the Sumerian king lists as king of Shuruppak in the times before the flood. The oldest known copy of the epic tradition concerning Atrahasis can be dated by colophon, which is a scribal identification. So it's like, I guess, it's the way to date these clay tablets, to the reign of Hammurabi's great-grandson, Amisadokwa, which was 1646 to 1626 BC. But various old Babylonian fragments exist as well. It continued to be copied into the first millennium BC, as we've just learned, right, Dave? That's when, after the first millennium, sort of no further copies were made. The Atrahasis story also exists in a later fragmentary Assyrian version, having been first rediscovered in the library of Ashurbanipal. But because of the fragmentary condition of the tablets and ambiguous words, translations had been uncertain. Its fragments were assembled and translated first by George Smith as the Chaldean account of Genesis. The name of its hero was corrected to Atrahasis by Heinrich Zimmern in 1899. In 1965, Wilfrid G. Lambert and A.R. Millard published many additional texts belonging to the epic, including an old Babylonian copy, which was written around 1650 BC, which is our most complete surviving recension of the tale. These new texts greatly increased knowledge of the epic and were the basis for Lambert and Millard's first English translation of the Atrahasis epic in something approaching entirety. A further fragment has been recovered in Ugarit. Walter Burkert traces the model drawn from Atrahasis to a corresponding passage, the division by lots of the air, underworld, and sea among Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon in the Iliad, in which a resetting through which the foreign framework still shows. In its most complete surviving version, the Atrahasis epic is written on 3 tablets in Akkadian, the language of ancient Babylon. Dave?
Tablet 1 contains a creation myth about the Sumerian gods. Anu, Enlil, and Enki, gods of the sky, wind, and water, when gods were in the ways of men, according to its incipit. Following the cleromancy, casting of lots, sky is ruled by Anu, earth by Enlil, and the freshwater sea by Enki. Enlil assigned junior divines to do farm labor and maintain the rivers and canals, but after 40 years, the lesser gods, or Dingers, rebelled and refused to do strenuous labor. Instead of punishing the rebels, Enki, who is also the kind, wise counselor of the gods, suggested that humans be created to do the work. The mother goddess, Mami, I like that. I like that, Mickey. Mami.
Well, where do you think the word comes from? Right?
Yeah, exactly, right? That's straight away. The light came on again. I'll repeat that again. The mother goddess Mami is assigned the task of creating humans by shaping clay figurines mixed with the flesh and blood of the slain god Geshu-E, a god who had intelligence. His name means ear or wisdom. All the gods in turn spit upon the clay. After 10 months, a specially made womb breaks open and the humans are born. Tablet 1 continues with legends about overpopulation and plagues. Atrahasis is mentioned at the end of Tablet 1. Tablet 2 begins more overpopulation of humans and the god Enlil sending first famine and drought to at formulaic, that's the intervals of 1200 years or so, to reduce the population. In this epic, Enlil is depicted as cruel, capricious god, while Enki is depicted as a kind, helpful god, perhaps because priests of Enki were writing and copying the story. They wanted to depict him as being kind. Tablet 2 is mostly damaged, but ends with Enlil's decision to destroy humankind with a flood, and Enki bound by an oath to keep the plan secret. Good on you, Enki. We knew you'd help. Tablet 3 of the Atrahasis epic contains the flood story. This is the part that was adopted in Tablet 11 of the epic Gilgamesh. Tablet 3 of Atrahasis tells how the god Enki warns the hero Atrahasis, extremely wise it means, of Shuruppak, speaking through a reed wall suggestive of an oracle, to dismantle his house, perhaps to provide a construction site, and build a boat to escape the flood planned by the god Enlil to destroy the humankind. The boat is to have a roof like Apsu. That's a subterranean freshwater realm presided over by the god Enki. Upper and lower decks, and to be sealed with bitumen. Atrahasis boards the boat with his family and animals and seals the door. The storm and flood begin. Even the gods were afraid. In Tablet 3, 4 lines 7 through 9, the words river and riverbank are used, which probably mean the Euphrates River, because Atrahasis is listed in WB 62 as a ruler of Shuruppak, which was one of the Euphrates rivers. After 7 days, the flood ends and Atrahasis offers sacrifices to the gods. Enlil is furious with Enki for violating his oath. Good on you, Enki. But Enki denies violating his oath and argues, I made sure life was preserved. Wow. Enki and Enlil agree on other means for controlling the human population. And guess what one of those was, Meki?
I know, exactly, right?
It was
kills
mortality.
Yeah, 100%. Now, before we move on, excuse me. Now, you have to understand that this is 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years old, right? This story. That's when it was written down, about 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. And they're talking about overpopulation, a global overpopulation even, right, of humans, and how we deal with that. I mean, you have to, okay, let's say for argument's sake here, that all of this is complete fantasy and made up. I have to applaud the people of the time to even come up with the concept of overpopulation. Because back in those days, you would just move to the next valley, if you will, more or less, right? I mean, I'm not saying that they wouldn't understand the overcrowding cities, because they lived in, fairly large cities, of course, but overpopulation to be so bad that the gods had to interfere to deal with it, that's quite a concept to come up with, right? Unless that actually was what happened. Okay, and if you read it, it could just be an account of something that happened. It doesn't seem fantastical, and certainly these gods aren't all powerful, right? They're quite human-like. I mean, most ancient pantheons before we had this monotheistic thing come along were quite human-like in their motivations, their psychology, in the way they interacted with each other and humans. But the whole story around a lesser form of gods, the Igigi, or as he called here, the Dingirs, right, which is just a synonym for Igigi. They didn't want to do the work anymore. So what did they do? Well, they created us, more or less, according, in fact, to some of the epic, the black-headed ones, the guys or girls with the black hair to do the work. And we didn't like that very much either, obviously. But not only that, we must have been quite troublesome, because we seem to have spread very quickly. We seem to have had quite a bit of offspring, if you will, right? Which to me indicates a number of things. One, these gods, Anu, Enlil, Enki, and so forth, are quite long-lived. Because we see here that Enlil sends famine, drought, at an interval of 1,200 years to reduce the population. So every 1,200 years, something happens to cull the population.
But hang on.
Meaning, of course,
that means he must be living for 10,000 years or something.
Well, again,
or who knows?
Now, if you read it with our mindset of today, even a mindset of 100 years, 500 years ago, in fact, only now we're starting to come out of that mindset, that's completely fantastical. Nobody lives for 10,000, 100,000 years. That's impossible. Well, the answer is no, it's not.
That's right.
It is not impossible, okay, at all. In fact, we are dying because, as Dave mentioned earlier, we've got a built-in kill switch, okay, that is activated at a certain point. In fact, if you've got a bad lifestyle, it's activated a lot faster. And it also acts a lot faster on your demise. But the point is, it is a kill switch. Should we be amazed when we hear of lifespans that are 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 years? No, not at all. Not at all. Why? I mean, okay, all we have today is what we know. Like we live like 100. If you're 100 years old, that's wow, whoa, good innings there. I mean, that's not bad. 100 years. But no, not really. That's not even out of infancy. Do you know what I think, Dave? And you're right. We had made it across the entire globe in that time. I believe that as well. Dave just sent me a message. But you know what that means? If truly our lifespan, or our unaltered lifespan, was in the thousands of years, let's not even say tens, but let's say thousands of years, for argument's sake, or even hundreds of years, that means we are just children playing at civilization. And that would also explain why we are so violent and why nothing is actually working out well, because we are children. Think about this for a second, right? Observe your own children in the playground, right? Within the context of the human race, we have children, right? And I mean, it's chaos, right? I mean, they come up with rules as they get a bit older, and then but then one will say, oh no, they kick over the sandcastle and take their toys and go home, right? Because they got a tantrum. We, in the context of racial age, racial age, right? We are those children. Yeah. We're never allowed to grow up. We should never be, like, unless we're like 500 years old, we should never be allowed near anything of consequence. Right? Well, no, it's like true.
Yeah, it's true, Mickey. It's like the drinking age. It's like the responsibility age. It's about the age of consent, where you're legally able to consent for something, right? I see the same thing. If you say we had children, say we're the gods, right? And respectively, our 120 years to their, say, I don't know, 5 years. If humans only made it to 5 years old, and we were watching them play, we would be considering them as immature as we are to them, to the Anunnaki. Bingo.
That's my point, 100%. So look at it in this context, right? But so people talk about the limitation of light and whatever. I don't believe that the speed of light. That's my own personal opinion. I don't think the speed of light is a limitation, but let's say it were.
It's no limitation.
Yeah, but if it were, then if you lived for 100,000 years, so what? So what? I mean, in the context, or even if you lived a million years, then a trip to the next solar system would be a fraction of your lifespan, right? And then your sleep cycles might be different to ours as well. I mean, we talk about the sleeping gods quite a bit. Oh no, he slept for an age, things like that. Even Odin, for example, Odin's sleep, right? They sleep for an age because then they're awake for an age, or whatever it might be. So
the Indonesian gods do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So the life cycle is completely different. So I mean, look at the mayfly, right? It lives for a day. It lives for a day. Its entire life happens in that day. And if you relate that to anything else, and you can understand the parallels, right? I mean, if a human being is 100 years, okay, so our 100 years, the mayfly does in a day. Okay? And the gods have 100,000 years to do our 100 years, and so on and so forth, right? If you put everything in context, it becomes a lot clearer. It also becomes clear that they don't care. Why would you care? Would you care about a mayfly, esteemed listener? Well, unless you're a Buddhist, probably not, right? But it's still an important life form. But compared to me, I'm a human being. I live 100 years. You live one day. Who cares if I swat you? It doesn't matter what happens to you. In fact, I don't even notice you most of the time, right? Interestingly enough, these gods of any ancient pantheon, that goes, from the Roman, Greek, right through to the Babylonian pantheons, from time to time elevated human beings like you and me to god status. Now, how do you do that? How do you do that? Now, these were extraordinary human beings, like Hercules is one, right? And Atrahasis, I think, is another, in fact. And they're in the Bible, even they're people that were taken. Ezekiel was taken up into the sky and never came back. Ezekiel never came back. So you see that something can be done to us to elevate us into that esteemed club of gods. My opinion is that they just turn on the telomeres, right, and to protect the telomeres. That's what I think they do. There are probably some other things as well that make you maybe stronger, smarter, faster, whatever. But certainly the telomeres. So again, you have to look at all of this within context. And I understand it's hard to think about this as something real, because we are so focused on our everyday life, Dave. I mean, this is our life. What you talking about, Mackie and Dave? You're crazy. How could you, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, really, we could live that long? Well, the answer is yes. The aberration is that we die. The mystery is why on earth the telomeres would be switched off. That's the mystery. Not why we not living for 10,000 years. That's not the mystery, because every organism wants to live. Okay, the primary evolutionary, if there's evolution or such a thing, the directive is to live. Both as an individual. That's why we have self-preservation. All right, you don't just lie down and die. There's always no creature just lies down and dies. Not really. Some creatures actually are immortal. Right, so let's be clear about that as well. Sorry, I just needed to mention that, Dave. I thought that was very important that we understand all the background and draw the parallels here, right?
I completely agree. Meki, did you know that if we live to 100 years, that would be 36,500 generations of mayfly.
Bingo! Right?
Right? So just putting this in context, absolutely agree with you 100%. And like I said to you before, that humans made it across the entire globe during that time, the pre-flood time, from creating the black-headed people to the flood. Because, as we know, Meki, we've discussed the stories from each community around the planet of the same flood.
Yep.
So it wasn't as though they were just in Iraq, modern day Iraq.
Oh, no.
That's it. I know. The story is, because of the research, the story is aimed around there, right? Around Samaria, modern day Iraq. And that's where the texts were found describing all of this. But humans had made it across the planet by the time the flood came.
Oh, look, absolutely. Look, and maybe that's where the headquarters were. Who knows? But the point is that geographically speaking, it's not a bad spot to be if you need to access the rest of the world, right? It's also very fertile. You got 2 rivers. I mean, look, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's in favor of this particular region, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's completely true. I mean, if you were an advanced civilization, I'm not saying an extraterrestrial civilization, but certainly an advanced civilization on this planet, and you didn't want your own people to work anymore, you create, if you had the means, you create a genetic labor force, an artificial that is limited or see, every creation myth says that we were created in the image of that particular god.
That's right.
Right? Why?
It means we. Yeah. Well, it means. I mean, it's a successful, not protocol, format You know, head on top of a body with arms from the shoulders, and the hips have legs on them. That's you can ambulate. You can get work done. You have dexterity. You've got fingers. You've got stereo vision. You can hear. You can take instructions. You can think, and your response times are pretty quick. Right. Yeah. That's the whole design around the human format. Right. It seems particularly useful. And it would get the job done. But Meki, I'm just gonna raise something here, and that's the Igigi existed before they were asked to do all this manual labor.
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
So they were already created.
Yeah.
And they've gone manual labor. What? No,
exactly.
We cook for you, like we're the chefs, or we do your house cleaning. Yeah. We don't do digging.
No. I will submit this. I will say that the Anunnaki and the Igigi are the same people. I'm going to say this here, right? This is my interpretation of it. And the Anunnaki just happened to be the ruling class, if you will, right? The educated, the whatever, right? In charge. They were essentially in charge. Whereas the Igigi were the workforce. Still the same race, the same blood, and all that, right? But not as I guess elevated as the Anunnaki, but certainly having all the faculties that they have. And then the Anunnaki being somewhat removed from the toil and the hardships of the Igigi, completely ignored. Maybe not even ignored. That's the wrong word. They weren't aware. They simply weren't aware of the hardships. And the Igigi said, "Hey, come on, guys. We came to this earth. I guess they came from this for We didn't think that we were just digging all the dig. Well, how come we do all the digging and you're sitting up there and you're eating all the manna? What's going on with that?" And then the Anunnaki, because if it was a slave uprising or even a created workforce uprising, then you go, well, no, screw you. You're our slave, so you do what we tell you.
That's right.
No, quite the opposite. Enlil, who later then wanted to destroy humans, right? Remember? Enlil says, geez, sorry. Oh, wow. I'm so sorry. I was so busy playing golf, I didn't realize. You're having a hard time, right? Why don't you just have cake if there's no bread? But
the meat cake.
So I think that's probably more likely the context into which this occurred. And they go, you know what? Because that's a major undertaking, creating like I guess a clone or an artificial workforce, and then they went. And you see, it's actually quite specific. And I want to, again, these are tablets written 4,000 years ago. I want to. Here we go. The mother goddess Mami is assigned the task of creating humans by shaping clay figurines mixed with the flesh and blood of the slain god Geshtu, a god who had intelligence. All the gods in turn spit upon the clay. After 10 months, a specially made womb breaks open and humans are born. So this is not, some god just, creating some clay and then breathing life into it, like the Bible. Like this is actually where the Bible got its
DNA.
Yeah, but this is very specific. It's not just like, I created humans and there they were. No, after 10 months gestation, the first human babies are born. So the fetuses gestate in a special womb, specially made womb, 10 months, then the first humans are born. And you're right, DNA, blood and flesh, and then each god turns or gives part of his or her DNA. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not saying they spat specifically, but okay. So no, clay. What?
Today, how do you take a DNA sample? A mouth swab.
Yeah, bingo. That's exactly right.
You don't need part of a rib anymore. It's just there you go. You got a swab. We can get your DNA, right? So that's all it takes. Maybe that's what it's describing, right?
No, I completely agree. But this description, looked at it from today's point of view, this is taken from the tablets themselves. So this is the original tablet. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the tablet. This is not something that was translated over and over again 1,000 times and changed in the translation, like the Bible, for example. This is the original tablet, not maybe the original story, because the tablet obviously would have been created at some point and would have written it down a story that already existed. But it's got an astounding amount of scientifically valid details. Okay, you have to look at it from that point of view. This is not a God that took a piece of clay and then started breathing life into it. This is not that story. But clearly, that's where our story comes from in the Bible. Okay, very clearly, it is not that story. This is the story. Oh no. We need the flesh and blood, and then we need a whole bunch of DNA samples from the other gods to make sure that we get viable DNA in this new creature. Right now, we obviously it has to be designed a certain way, but it was designed initially with telomerase switched on, because the switching off doesn't come until later.
That means the Igigi also had their telomeres turned on.
Correct.
Telomerase turned on. Sorry.
Correct.
And
but
it wasn't until after the flood that they decided to punish us by punish us. I suppose it's the wrong word, but to reduce our lifespan. Yeah.
Now, take it into the context of overpopulation. Now, the Babylonian, Akkadian, and Sumerian texts are not the only ones talking about overpopulation. We shared with you flood myths from around the world, where overpopulation was actually a recurring theme, and resulting cannibalism as well. But overpopulation kept coming up, and I thought, really? That's just crazy talking about overpopulation in that context back then, right? But there it is. Now, if you had humanity, our humanity, with an extended lifespan, let's say we did live 5,000-6,000 years, because clearly Enlil sent these famine and droughts every 1,200 years to keep the population down, right? It's like controlling it's like culling a population of cattle, or and yeah. So if we did actually live that long, and we were as fertile as we are today, overpopulation would absolutely be a problem, because nobody dies. So if you had 2-3 children, right, and they have 2-3 children, right, and so on and so forth, but you don't actually kick the bucket, as it were, but kept on living and had more children, forget about the exponential growth of humanity. It would be the curve would be well beyond exponential, in fact, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because nobody dies, like all accidents, notwithstanding.
Yeah.
And think about that. All of a sudden, and this is, I'm sorry, but I'm just thinking of this now. But all of a sudden, this whole raft of stories around overpopulation becomes extremely plausible, because nobody's dying, and they're having children, and maybe they made a mistake by making human beings, reproductive at the age of 16 or 18 or whatever it was, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, think about that. Let's say you can have children for several hundred years. But think about it. In the Bible,
the window is so broad that you're going to have thousands of children. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, you could, not just you, but all of you, and your children as well. And all of a sudden, you are in fact worse than rats and mice. There'd be too many people.
And think about this also, Mekki. If your telomerase is turned on, your body's skin elasticity would continue as though you're maybe aged 30 to 35.
Correct.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, all of these things make perfect sense. It also makes sense that, and maybe this is another thing. Maybe sexuality wasn't that big with these. Now think about it this way. Let's say you've lived for 10,000, 20,000 years, and you've seen it all, you've done it all, right? So sexuality isn't really that big a deal for you anymore. Or maybe it is, but maybe it isn't. But all of a sudden, you see these humans, and they're having all this carnal fun and whatever, and the Igigi go, hey, they know what they're doing. That looks like an awful lot of fun. Let's see how they do it, right? And maybe it was a lot more stylized or ritual in their world, because they lived so long, and they were a lot more sensible, and they didn't have that many children, right? That's why there weren't that many of them. I'm talking about the Anunnaki now, right? Mm-hmm. And because it's just not a sustainable thing. Now, you can only sustain a kind of lifespan if you're not just bound to the one planet. If you've got several planets or solar system and whatnot, you can expand into the universe. Okay, then it's not an issue, because the universe is pretty big. It'll take a long time for us to fill it up, right? But if you're bound, and maybe that was a situation they hadn't been in before, right? Maybe they crashed landing. They couldn't get off, and they didn't think it through when they created these humans and gave them these, well, essentially not whatever they had, except also maybe a strong sex drive, because they used whatever was locally available here as some DNA stock as well. I don't know, But
See, that's
clearly,
what I think. What the mud and the clay thing was.
yeah,
I think that description there describes because mud and clay would have come from Earth.
yeah,
So I
native.
think that part of it was any existing hominid DNA, and they made something from it. That's what I still believe.
Yeah, look, completely. So because you had to start with something, right? So you had to take something, right? And still, I mean, if you compare us to our closest relatives, right, the great apes, we're very different, and we're a lot weaker in many ways, like physically weaker, and look, there's a whole bunch of stuff that where
We'd make
just
great
we are a
pets,
lot more
Mackie.
bingo. We have more in common from a genetic point of view with domesticated animals than we have with wild animals. Human beings is, right? That's a fact. So taking all of that into consideration, right, and understanding maybe a little bit better what the contexts are here, specifically around, I guess, what we believe today. Most of what we believe today harks back to those days in Western civilization, for the most part, but other parts of the world as well. And clearly, it was like Dave said, this was a global phenomenon. Global. What is the prevalent hair color on the planet?
Black.
Bingo. By far, it's not even an argument. It's not even a contest.
No, it's not.
Okay, black.
And
Black.
what was the color of all of the ancient peoples? Black. Yep.
Yeah, all of them. Every last one. It doesn't matter if you were African or South American or Asian. Even the Europeans, we know this now, right? From some of the surviving corpses and so forth. The redheads, the blondes, and so forth. That's a fairly it's either a fairly recent phenomenon or maybe a phenomenon that was brought.
Could have been
upon
another
us.
visitor.
Well, yeah. Look, who knows, right? And you know what I think about people with red hair, and it's a very specific kind of red hair and skin type that I believe constitutes a completely different ethnotype within the human family of peoples, I guess. But yeah, so it is a global phenomenon, and the flood myths are global. The gods are global. The sky gods, specifically the gods that came down from the sky and taught us this, that, and the other, and whatnot, and then also the decision of the gods to color us at intervals, right? I mean, hey, I get it. Okay, and then they decided, well, you know what? That's not really working out too well. That's not the best way to do it. Even the flood didn't really work that well, right? I mean, can we really cause it? I mean, the thing is this: did they cause it? Did they divert an asteroid from its path to impact in the Indian Ocean? Maybe, could be. It would certainly be very effective because that's what happened. Or was it just that something that happened anyway, and they then either took credit for or claimed to have brought upon us to color us, but certainly after
or
the
they
flood.
didn't prevent it from happening.
Or didn't. Thank you, Dave. Good point. Or didn't prevent it from happening, right? It's like we'll just let it happen, like 9/11. We just let it happen. There you go. That show's going to be blacklisted. But the point is that the landscape for us human beings after the flood was very different. We no longer enjoyed these long lives because they decided, oh, you know what? This is the perfect time to change the human race, to make them shorter lived. Yeah, because before the flood it was clear. In fact, if you look at the Bible, this is just like puzzle pieces falling into place. We were kicked. So we were in the Garden of Eden. That's the mythology. We're in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, blah blah, running around, all happy and naked and not worried about. Then the snake comes along and tells, "Hey, no, you should. Yeah, look what you're doing, people. You got to learn yourself something, right? You got to try to improve yourselves. Become educated." And Eve goes, "Yeah, maybe we should become educated." And Adam goes, "All right, fine, let's become educated." Eats the apple and knows stuff. So all of a sudden, people start knowing stuff. They were tempted by the snake, by Lucifer, by Prometheus, whoever. Brought us the light, brought us the knowledge, and here we are. We've got some knowledge. Oh, yeah, you're right. We are living like primitives. We should be doing something more. Ha! You are now being kicked out of the Garden of Eden, or whatever you want to say, and this and that happened, right? So you will not eat from the tree of life. All right? so you will not become immortal like gods. And I think that's where timelines in the Old Testament become mixed up in Genesis. I think there are certain events that in the Genesis account are mixed up to the way they actually occurred in history. Now, I don't think the Sumerians, Babylonians, and Akkadians are mixed up because they have it right. Because they don't talk about the Garden of Eden. There's no Garden of Eden. There's no Adam, right? They tell us exactly what happened, how it happened. Like the black-headed ones were created, and here's how it was: 10-month gestation, especially made womb, which clearly means artificial gestation. Yeah, which is also a theme that we find after the flood in some of the stories, where these people came out of were grown trees. So I mean, clearly a machine that looked like a tree or whatever, or something.
Yeah, sort of like Matrix, like.
Yeah, exactly. So all of a sudden, the new humanity after the flood, if you will, right? There's a lot of stories around how there's hardly anyone surviving from before the flood, but the new humanity, it had these limitations that the old humanity did not have. Yeah. So we are like humanity Mark II, or Mark III, but certainly Mark II from the textual evidence that we can gather here, right? And this probably goes back. Quite a long time. So I propose here that there was a population event 100,000 years ago with mitochondrial Eve, and then I think about 28,000 years ago with Y chromosomal Adam, and then something more recently, or maybe the Y chromosomal Adam was the flood myth. I don't know. But the point is, something happened in the not too distant past. I'm talking about 14, 15,000 years ago here that put us back again. So we might be humanity Mark 3 or 4 potentially.
Yeah,
right?
And this is one of our points where we're not the first technological civilization. Meki, the Anunnaki, so the Sumerian word for first man is Adamu.
Yes, correct. That's
so
correct.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind you again that why they didn't have a word, why they didn't have an Adam. That's where the origin of Adam is suspected to have come from.
No, but Dave, that's in fact. Thank you for mentioning it, because you couldn't have said something more beautiful at this point. Because again, Adam and Eve, the story, blah blah. Adamu, yes, the first men, the first humans, right? After like that the Anunnaki put together. Of course, the name would survive, but
that's
not
right.
in the context of its original. I guess historical truth, if you will, as describing a whole bunch of people, right? No, this is an Adam. So the story could have gone on, so then they created Adamu, and then Adam, and then it would just dumb down over the generations. Where you go, no, they created Adam. Oh, clearly they couldn't have just created Adam. They must have created Eve as well. How did they do that? Well, they took his rib. Okay, that makes sense. So the creation of the Adamu or Adam. That is what was remembered in the Old Testament. But if you go back, and I'm so glad we still have these cuneiform tablets. Imagine we didn't have them.
Exactly.
None of this would make any sense, right? But all of a sudden, with the context of all of this, all of it in totality, it's sort of like this veil drops from your eyes, and you go, oh my good Lord! I mean, wow. Because I'm not saying what we're saying here is exactly what happened, but certainly. Something like that occurred. I mean,
Yeah, Meki, at the end of the last show, I after the show finished, I translated a couple of interesting lines from a song because of this translation issue.
Oh yes, please mention it.
All right. Now, the translation issue is when you have any text at all, doesn't matter what it is, and you translate it through one language and then back again, you end up with the meaning lost. The words are there, they're not quite contextually accurate anymore, yeah, but what happens is the message, the context is, I just have to say, it's lost. So I took a song, an interesting song that I thought that we would all know, and I just can't find it now, Mekki. I'm looking all over the place for it. And I took Born in the USA. And what I'll do, I'll let Mekki continue. Oh, no, it'll be next week's show. So next week's show, I'm going to open with a translation through 5 languages and then out at English from the English text of Born in the USA, first paragraph, first verse, and we'll see and we'll do a comparison about what that means. What was lost, and can we make heads or tail of the original meaning to the way it is now read? Because in Mekki's argument just here, and I love this, is what would happen if we didn't have that Sumerian text?
Mm-hmm.
The only copy we've got to work on or work with is the Bible. That's the only thing, and that makes any sense, right? But when you go, okay, well, let's have a look at the original text. Oh, I've got it here. Really? Yeah, well, this is the same. It appears as though this is, and everyone's agreeing with this these days, that this is the original text. This is where all of these other stories came from. And they go, well, but how come it doesn't mention this topic? Because that was added later. What about Adam? Well, that's Sumerian's word for first man, Adam. Right. Okay. Now I'm starting to see some things that line up. The Great Flood. There it is. It's in the text. Yeah. Yeah.
Even the name Utnapishtim, which is in fact Atrahasis, the other name is Utnapishtim. If you look at the vowels, na, pish, na, utna, noa, right? Could be a remembering of that particular name, Utnapishtim.
Yeah. So but the Atrahasis in history we'll kick off for next week, and I'll do that translation thing. It astounded me because I know what's lost. And you can see it yourself when I do this well-known song. You'll see it yourself, just how much is still there, but what is lost. And you'll be able to make your own determination, like we have, and you'll be astounded where it takes your mindset. Because I know a lot of people who are deeply religious, and they go by the actual words and the phrasing in the Bible. And I go, well, that's really cool. And, I think the message is okay. But where would it be? And what are we actually doing for ourselves? And how are we behaving? If the Anunnaki landed right now, right today, on the White House lawn, how would you treat them? How would you look at them? Would we still have the same view of them, or would they just simply be aliens? Would they not be our maker?
Good question.
Sumerians? How hard a pill would that be to swallow, Mekki?
Yeah, well, this is the thing, though. I mean, now, I'm not saying we're equivalent. Obviously, we wouldn't be equivalent technologically, but we would understand a lot of the stuff that previously would just have been godlike powers or magic. Right, and that's why you have to read all these things with your modern eyes. You have to read them with your modern eyes, otherwise, no point. How would we treat them? Look, shoot first, ask questions later. I think that's what we do these days. It's certainly a conundrum. I mean, imagine what it would. And maybe this is why there hasn't been disclosure date. Imagine what it would do to the world religions. Imagine what it would do to the regular people.
Guess what, Mekki?
What?
Come
back next week.
See you next week, everyone.
Man, this is your time. Seize the day. Never surrender.